This is the Mark Howley Show.
Where I ask my guests, how did you do it and why?
All right, well, listen, I forgot to say hi, but we were just chit-chatting away here. Mm-hmm. Your name is Josh Ashby, and why don't you give us your call signals?
My call signals?
Just your name,
sure,
number, whatever it might be.
Yeah, Josh Ashby. Go by Josh. It's Joshua.
Sure. Joshua.
I go by Josh. Middle name Thomas.
Joshua Thomas Ashby.
Yep.
And what is your profession?
So I've been an attorney up until right now. I would say I'm on hiatus. So right now my focus is 100% on my family.
Okay.
But I spent over a decade as an attorney. So law school.
So wait a minute. What is the field that you're in? I find that to be very interesting.
Yeah. I'm a weed lawyer.
Weed. So
cannabis attorney.
Yeah,
cannabis
do we do
attorney.
bong hits before we get started?
All the jokes have been made. It's funny. I do a
one.
lot of trainings for other attorneys moving into that space because I got started in the space day one as an attorney. My first client was a cannabis company.
Okay.
When I very first started practicing and 100% focus on cannabis and related areas of law. Transactional, not litigation. So no fighting, just the business transactions, raising money.
Raising money.
Raising money, cleaning up your records, business records, putting things in order. I say, look, a startup is quick and dirty. A lot of times, if you try to get everything lined up perfectly before you got started, you probably never start. Yeah,
what's the old saying is purpose. What perfect is behind very good. Whatever they say. It's not perfect, very good, good. It's basically I've even heard very good, perfect.
Yeah.
Just launch it.
That's it. And so try to reassure people in the beginning. Look, hey, that's our job as attorneys. We come in, we do top to bottom. We look at everything, make sure you're in order, get things addressed that's not addressed. Make sure everything's documented correctly, contracts in place, everything. And so I spent over 10 years doing that, dealing with regulatory approval process for licenses as additional states are coming online. So I graduated law school in 2013, which is right when the Washington laws passed in 2012.
Yep.
Were coming online. So they had at the end of 2013, the window for applications for retail, processor, grower. And so, yeah.
So now you went to college in Utah.
I started at University of Utah.
Okay.
Did not finish.
Okay.
Went to work for Congressman Cannon, so Utah 3rd District.
Okay.
Worked for him for a while.
Just as you're not a college grad at this point.
No, my focus was primarily on the campaign side, but doing policy work related to his reelection. So he's a 5-term congressman.
Wow.
Yeah.
That must have been, you see the inside of the game there.
You sure do. Yeah, it was a lot of fun. It was very interesting, very eye-opening. Feel very grateful for that experience so early on, but realized pretty quickly that if you wanted to make a difference, business was going to be the way to do that.
Yeah, I guess there's a fair amount of. I don't think I could ever be a politician just because you got to make a lot of strange bedfellows.
Yeah, it's you get in between a lot of things. Yeah, and in Utah, a great example of that is the credit unions and the banks. So a lot of the politicians will be accepting campaign contributions from both.
Okay.
But they are just, knives at each other's throats constantly, nonstop. Yeah. Very, very confrontational.
My brother is quite friendly with the Senator Portman from Ohio for a while. And, of course, Ohio, they're always asking, pro-life, pro-choice.
Mm-hmm.
And he used to say to my brother, in order to get elected, I have to say pro-life. Like I'm forced to do it, which is not my belief. And he said, it's just such a hot topic, like it or not. If I wanted to be elected, I had to ride that ugly horse into town. And he said every time I would come home, his wife and his kids would just give him ungodly shit. But he felt as though his that was where he had to go. I don't think I would have the.
That's a tough one, being in that position. In fact, my wife and I were just having a conversation about something very similar related to this last night, which is where do you draw the line in terms of some point, if you want to make a difference, you want to make change, you've got to work within the system to a degree.
Yep.
Doesn't mean you have to become part of the system. Certainly don't want to become part of the problem.
No.
But how do you do that?
So how did you get into, well, now let's just stop for a second here.
Mm-hmm.
This, by the way, is the Mark Howley Show. Okay? No kidding around here.
All right.
I don't want you to think it's not the Josh Ashby Show. Hell no. This is not the Josh Ashby Show. All right? So let's get that shit straight. You are a cannabis attorney. Is that, or what would you refer to yourself specifically?
I resisted that label for a long time. I'm like, I'm a startups or a business lawyer. And I finally had a client who was like, dude, own it. You wrote a book at this point. Come on.
I know. Lost in the Weeds.
Yeah.
I flicked through the sample of it, which I really enjoyed. It's only in a hardback though, correct?
No, I think it's paperback.
Okay,
paperback
good,
too.
good.
Yeah, you can buy it on Amazon.
Anyway, Lost in the Weeds, and pretty impressive for a guy. How old were you at that time?
Younger than I was now.
There we go.
It was 2015.
Was this pre-plane crash or post?
No, post. So I graduated law school in 2013.
Okay.
So just over 10 years ago, and it was pretty early on. So I think 2015 I published it.
Okay.
Yeah.
But
I can't say I can't take credit for the whole thing. I mean, it was the firm at the time. We had a lot of people in the office there who made significant contributions. So I think if you look at the cover, it says Ashby Law Group. So the name of the firm, not mine. So there's a lot of people who made.
Who's the Ashby?
That's me.
I know it says Ashby Law Group.
Ashby Law Group.
Okay.
So meaning that the group includes all the attorneys working for the firm.
Yeah. The hell with them. Your name's on it.
Okay.
I
don't know.
It's like my earlier conversation: passion, people, and perseverance. You got to takes more than just you to get that shit done.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know. I don't feel like I can get anywhere without all the people that you're working with, and I feel like it's important to acknowledge them. So,
well, it is. I mean, in the end, you got to, because. I mean, there's all these specialties. There's all these people that are really cool. All these people that are really helpful. And if you don't take a minute to say, not take a minute to say thanks, to just appreciate it, just flow off your tongue. Yeah, shouldn't be a requirement to get it out.
No, and we're very fortunate. So the associates who are most involved through that time period, Chris Larson and Sativa Rasmussen. Sativa's moved on to Dorsey Whitney, which is another AmLaw 100 firm like Fox Rothschild. Chris he's also practicing in the Seattle area with a firm, and so both in cannabis still. But both of them were contributors.
How the hell? You mentioned briefly that you were from, I think, correct me if I'm wrong, but sort of. Kind of a more conservative family as to the way a family was raised. I think you said that.
Yeah. I was raised Mormon, active Mormon.
Okay.
And so in that environment, which is very strict and conservative. Yeah.
I imagine it's not like no alcohol, no coffee, and
those are the rules.
And get high.
Yeah. Although marijuana is not specifically prohibited.
Oh, there we go.
Depending on
interpretation.
I suppose where the conversation goes, but yeah.
Well, I had a very intensive education as a Catholic, and I must say that let's just say I'm not practicing. That there's a significant amount of just sort of the doctrine and rules and regulations that. I'm not speaking. You don't have to speak to that comment, but it just became onerous and almost just something I personally just couldn't live with it. So I, what's the saying they say in the church? I'm falling away.
Okay.
But do you still hold the Mormon faith close to your heart?
We haven't been what I would say practicing for many years, and haven't raised our children in that environment, really actively attending church. I do think whether it's Catholicism or Mormonism or Buddhism, Shinto, there are important, valuable lessons in and all of those, in my experience, that we try very hard to impart to our children, to teach them about. So I'd like to think that, I've passed what I consider to be some of the best parts.
Yep, same here.
My family.
They're saying, I don't know if you ever heard it. Have you ever heard the comment that I am culturally Catholic, but by practice I am not?
Yeah. See, I think that's how I feel about Mormon. So Fox Rothschild is a very Jewish firm.
Oh, is it? Okay.
Rothschild, right?
Yeah, well, it's no great shock.
In fact, they'll tell you that it's over 100 years old. The firm's maybe coming up on 110, 120 years.
Not a newbie.
And the history of the firm was that, it had been founded originally because if you were Jewish at that time, you could not get a job at one of what are called the white shoe firms.
Oh, of course. So
we
called them blue bloods.
Blue bloods? Okay.
Yeah, that was a Philly term.
So that was its roots. But it's very much, in my experience being there, it was very much it's a cultural thing. Well, I feel the same about Mormonism. It's very much, there's a culture that's ingrained. You're raised in that culture. It's a part of who you are, regardless whether you're going to church every Sunday. It's very much a part of your culture. So.
Or you go to the synagogue.
Mm-hmm.
Whatever one it is, whatever it may be. No, I agree. I think everybody in the world these days, other than some of the, I think everybody, even those who are practicing, have some appreciation for the other ones. Mm-hmm. Although there are a pile of Catholics who, they believe that you are, damned to eternal, I don't know what it is, but it's not good. Mm-hmm. And if you don't follow their faith. And that always is like, oh, cut me a break. Really? You think that this loving God is casting you into the, fires of hell forever?
Somebody I respect a lot says, he said many times, he's quoting someone else, I'm not sure who it is, but all zealots become humorless eventually over time. So all zealots become humorless eventually. So, yeah.
Well, enough of that. So how the hell do you find cannabis from a Mormon lad to cannabis? That's a little bit of a shift.
Having done a few things over in Asia, I had somebody that I had known years before I went to law school. Didn't even know I had gone to law school yet, and reached out and was like, hey, we need to find some packaging in Asia. You have any ideas or any contacts? Or
Contact
what do
me.
We do?
I sell bags.
If I had known at the time, I would have been happy. I said, he was being very cagey about what he's doing. I'm like, dude, spit it out, man. What are you up to? He's like, what do you think about weed? I'm like, what do you mean exactly? He's like, we're starting a marijuana company. And I'm like, well, who's your lawyer?
In China?
I went to law school.
Wait, in China?
In Washington. But they were looking to source packaging overseas. And so they had a very cool, patented, unique design for flour that they could ship in a jar. Suspended brands is a suspension system. Very cool, very innovative.
So interesting you say that. Are you familiar with a woman by the name of Hillary Bricken?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. So she's just a few years ahead of me in this area. Yeah. Also very involved in cannabis.
Yeah. Very driven young lady. Mm-hmm. Or maybe not as young any longer, but still young versus me. But anyway.
Don't say that. I feel like I'm right.
Yeah, my God. God in heaven. Look, I'm 63. Okay. So there's a lot older than me, but there's more younger now. Yeah. So anyway, she once, I think I told you this, I had her come out because in my business, everybody wanted to come out with, weed bags. They wanted me to call it the 420 line. So I had some sort of ethical
420? What? I don't get it.
Exactly. My daughters are supporting it, and I'm like, what's 420? So anyway, the bottom line is that I always had just sort of this moral, ethical conflict that some guy's going to get pulled over and my bags are in the back, and all of a sudden, on the news, whatever.
I've got a great story about that, but continue.
Okay. So anyway, I have her in, and she gives me an opinion. Mm-hmm. And in the end, she, maybe like you, she went through everything, but went through some of the real intricacies of being a packaging supplier and some of the, soup to nuts stuff. And in the end, I said to her, in packaging, what would you advise of me? I'm a private company. Mm-hmm. I want to, obviously someday possibly sell it or gather investors. What would you say? And she said, candidly, I think, let me not speak for you, Hillary, if I screwed this up, that she probably would not do it. given all the complexities of it and given the nature of my business.
It's a very complex area, yeah. And as far as cannabis regulations are concerned, that's a messy one. Every state's got their own rules.
Yeah. So I called my bank. I won't give their name at the time. And they were like, yeah, everything's okay. And I said, well, do you any work with bank with any of the cannabis? No, that's not our policy. We won't. So I'm like, okay, that's good to know. Then I called my law firm, Stoll Reeves at the time.
And Stoll Reeves does.
Yeah. They were our corporate attorneys.
Those guys do cannabis.
Do they now?
No, they're not a lot of larger or even regional firms were practicing cannabis law.
Yeah, so they asked me.
They did.
They asked me and gave me sort of a generally good comment to that effect. And then I said, so how many clients do you have? And they said, well, at this point, we're not taking them.
Oh, at Stoll Reeves? This must have been a while ago.
15 years ago.
Okay,
and I'm like,
before.
Well, that's telling. That so anyway, so I didn't do it.
Those firms were the largest source of referrals for me early days, and I think absolutely that's part of how I got my start was that those firms weren't taking cannabis clients. Oftentimes they'd have an existing client, so say an investor who had invested in other companies, things like that. They didn't want to risk losing their client the other areas.
Sure.
Small firm, perfect. We'll send them over to you. You can't handle anything more than this little thing. And so, in fact, one of my professors from law school, who's a partner at K&L Gates at the time, was a really good source of referrals for me.
Okay, so I work with a woman by the name of Wendy Goff at Stoll Reeves. You may not know her, and I'm only saying it because I think she's a great attorney and been always just so helpful with me. And she's not the one who gave me that opinion, but just in case anybody out there wants a good, she does all my next generation stuff. What the hell do you call that? Oh, my wills and estates.
Oh, okay.
Very, very detailed and very helpful. Anyway, so on with that. So now you've found yourself in the weed game. And what are some of the intricacies around that right now?
At the moment?
Well,
one of the biggest complexities right now, which is complexity from the beginning, is the federal-state dichotomy. So
explain that a little for those of us who don't know.
So federal law prohibits consumption, manufacture, selling of all cannabis. Well, of cannabis as you think of cannabis, recreational, adult use, medical, otherwise.
Yeah.
And some states have legalized it, so they have a legal regime wherein you can have a cannabis business. And so that's a pretty big conflict, depending where you come down on it. In fact, this was a really big issue for attorneys in this space. It's like, well, can you even work with a cannabis company as an attorney and advise somebody when what they're doing is a violation at some level of federal law, regardless whether state law? And we're fortunate in Washington, there's a Supreme Court who controls the ethics rules for attorneys, added a comment to the ethics rules in Washington saying, if you're advising somebody on the laws, we would much rather have an attorney advising them so that the person at least can get the best advice possible, follow the rules as best they can, and we're not going to fault somebody for that.
Okay. So that turned out, because I guess Colorado did it. Were they one of the first to do it?
Colorado and Washington did it at the same time. Colorado was a little quicker off the line. We say Washington really tried hard to work closely with the feds in order to say, well, what are we going to have to do in Washington when we legalize it to make sure that we're not going to draw any additional ire? We understand there's a conflict, but operating within that conflict, what are the priorities? At the time, it was called the Cole Memorandum, the Cole Memo, which had a list of things. It's like, all right, well, if you're not doing any of the following things, then generally we might leave you alone. But I've had DEA agents out at client sites, grows in Washington. They'll do ride-alongs, or at least did in years past, just as observers and just see. And although I'd never been at a site when visited secondhand accounts, where they're always very nice and very respectful and said, we're relieved that we're going to have to dedicate less resources to this.
So do you go there incog? you wear like the face mask and all that kind of stuff? So
No, but early on I wore a suit, and I learned pretty quick not to do that again.
Yeah.
Because then you got to go get it dry cleaned because it smells like marijuana.
Oh, yeah, that's not so
afterwards.
good. That's not so good. Yeah.
No.
Picking to go to the next client, all smelling like weed.
They're like, perfect.
We got the guy we
No,
wanted.
but I would tell associates, I'm like, maybe not wear clothes you want to wear later today with the client meeting, or else bring a change of clothes. But clients are like, come on, man, we're trudging through the mud here. You don't got to wear a suit out here to the site. So
yeah,
but,
that's kind of like Hawaii when you used to go out there where I used to wear suits because that was what we did.
Mm-hmm.
They finally were just like, dude,
yeah,
nobody's going to buy.
Appreciate the effort.
Yeah,
thank you.
Break it down. So I, when in Rome. So anyway, no, what was I going to say? I diverted my opinion, so I diverted whatever the hell I was going to say. So everybody just cut this out because Mark's just blabbering about something he doesn't even remember. So we'll go on with that. Nothing new. So now you've got yourself into the cannabis game, and what, kind of at a more lay terms, what are some of the things that someone should be aware of that either might be, let's start with the good things that they should be aware of, just kind of how to get it to the market. What do you do that you consider it to be a functional market?
So advice on the business side regarding how a cannabis business might succeed.
You can consider it a good market, a growing market, a dangerous market.
Well, I think most people in this space would say genie's out of the bottle on it, not going back in anytime soon. In fact, recently, Department of Health and Human Services, federal level, even came out with an opinion advising the Biden administration, you need to reschedule.
Wow.
This, which means it needs to be treated differently under the Controlled Substances Act. So it's coming.
So that'd be a Supreme Court decision.
No, not necessarily.
I don't know all my law.
Yeah, no, the Controlled Substances Act could be changed without having to go to the Supreme Court. But the schedule basically says, well, how are we going to treat a particular substance? Schedule 1 being the strictest, includes LSD, magic mushrooms.
These are
cannabis.
things that I had some time with, and I must say I had some enjoyment with, but this all came to a crashing end with a rehab. So anyway, so now what else? So do you perceive that the market is growing, or are there changes in the market?
Well, the whole business is about growing, right? No, growing.
There we go. Yeah, growing.
Changes. It's interesting. It tends to go like a lot of industries. It's cyclical, and agriculture especially is cyclical, not just seasonally, but you got up years and down and things. I think that based on what I hear and understand, now my focus is on the legal side, but I think people say generally it will likely be commoditized.
That
at
would
some
be
level.
my expectation.
Like a lot of agriculture.
Yep.
That there will always be a craft element, which in Washington, I feel like we've really embraced that.
Yeah.
Maybe your craft beer heritage.
Yeah.
But so there'll always be that craft element, I think. But, largely commoditized, especially if you distill it down, you lose a lot of the unique characteristics. So it's going to be around on the commodity side there. So it comes down to packaging. A lot of times, branding is what it is.
Packaging. Tricorp on Flex, just a wonderful company. Wonderful company.
So branding, packaging, the IP, intellectual property related to cannabis is really where a lot of people are focused.
So there's IP. I mean, it's a plant. You grow it. Whatever, it dries out. There is, I guess, the process of getting it from point A to point B is intellectual property.
So I'm not an intellectual property attorney.
Okay.
Not my focus, and refer people to an IP lawyer if somebody has IP questions. The branding, you can protect your brand like anything.
It's interesting in packaging. Aside from our little one-way valve, the belly button that goes in a coffee bag.
Sure.
Basically the films that you use cannot be patented. They're all raw materials, worldwide available. So, you're buying A, which anybody can buy, B, which anybody can buy, same with C. The stuff that mushes it all together are third-party
Yep.
adhesives. The ink is worldwide.
Mm-hmm.
So if you say, "Oh, I got this cool new package," well, no, you don't. You just happen to not be given the name of it. Now, we did have some luck with trademarks.
Yeah.
Which kind of
trademarks, branding.
They scare people away. They don't quite know what it is.
Mm-hmm.
And it has some effect, but it doesn't have the legal punch of a patent, at all. So now, you mentioned kind of delving into. Go ahead.
This is
Continue.
interesting, though.
My
There's a couple of
apologies.
interesting things related to this because generally, branding related things, trademark people turn to the federal government for because most companies aren't state boundary restricted. So you're going to go to other markets and things. So you just go straight to the feds to get it protected. Not an option with cannabis because it's illegal under the Controlled Substances Act. That wasn't possible, hasn't been possible. There are various ways people have tried to attack this problem, whether it's through parallel, lifestyle brand, things where it is legal. So you sell T-shirts, it's your brand, things like that, and then try to protect it. And then in hopes that when the Fed curtain drops, you'll then have some argument, right? But Washington State has pretty good IP protections. And so you can go through Washington State, get your brand and things protected. So there are other options.
Mm-hmm. How about, you mentioned the specialty game because the minute it came out, I ride up and down 9 or whatever it is, 202 around me, and there's basically these places that just look like, a basic professional would be like, oh, Christ, it looks like half like a damn porno store. And then I look at places, I think to myself, and I've started to see it, well, why wouldn't there be, much like specialty coffee, a place that you go that has
consumption lounge
doesn't
or
have any
something?
it doesn't have any negative, because I mean I have brothers and a bunch of friends who will get high, and so where do you go and you want to buy it and you don't look like a dirt ball?
So there's buying and there's consumption. So two different consumption lounges in Washington not allowed. That'd be like
within
a
the
bar,
facility.
Right? Yeah. Which you asked early on, like what are some things to know about cannabis industry? It's not a bunch of people all just smoking joints while they're out working on plants. It's not what it is. This is a business.
Some of them are. Some of them.
Not if you want to maintain your license. It's not.
Yeah.
Especially because you're under surveillance 24 hours a day.
Yikes.
But no, there are a lot of, I think, excellent examples of really high-end stores. They've taken what you call the day spa approach. So high design, very, walk in, it's a very comfortable, very well-designed, well-lit space with, people very friendly, they're very open, very approachable. And so, no question, there are some excellent stores. In fact, an early example that comes to mind for me is a store over on Kitsap Peninsula called the Root Cellar. Craig Fitzgerald, who started that. Beautiful store when you walk in.
What's the name of it again?
The Root Cellar.
Okay. Okay. Good.
It's over in the Belfair area.
Okay. Great.
Yeah.
All right. So now, so your basic dude who's, like on whatever it is, Route 9 running out of my home, and he's just got the sign blinking 420. What's the likelihood that individual has followed the rules appropriately? And what? Let's just kind of tick down a couple of them that are real rules that can get you in big trouble. What would be some of those?
Big rules. Well,
let's say are half of them
smoking a joint
good
in the grow room.
There we go. Or now without
over the
pointing
counter
at,
in the retail store. That is going to get you in a lot of trouble.
Yeah. Now, I mean, without pointing at any, would you say 10% of them are in violation of?
I couldn't even begin to estimate. I genuinely don't know. Unfortunately, you find out after the fact, so it's hard to say how many are in fact, doing something. I think that I'm probably, working with a self-selecting group in terms of if they're reaching out to a lawyer, working with a lawyer before the problem comes up, then, hopefully fewer occurrences like that. And I would say, in my experience over the years, people I'm working with are genuinely trying to follow the rules. They really are. And that's
they're trying to make money at it, and you can't be a scumbag.
No, and a lot of the people I work with were, these aren't people just coming from the heritage market.
The
They're
hell's a heritage market?
the black market. They're
Okay.
not just
Oh, okay.
they're not legacy growers. They are from Amazon. They are from Microsoft. They are from
Sure.
ESPN. They are from all of these, Disney.
Yeah.
These names that you would, household brand names that you'd recognize, they were there. They were an employee or an executive or
It's
something.
legal. It's legal. So what the hell?
And they leave and they want to, find their fortune. So get into cannabis.
Let me ask you back to where we were.
Yeah.
What would some be red flags if you say to a small guy or gal trying to start a company or sitting there on that Route 9 blink 420? What would be some of the things that you would most commonly think that they're not doing right?
If I saw the sign, well, I need to go back and check the rules because I never offer advice without.
Yeah, but I mean roughly. Let's go.
It does stand out about blinking being particularly in your face. It's usually they're pretty strict.
Yeah. Okay. So let's go not blinking for the moment.
A lawyer, I got to be technical.
Yeah. There we go. There we go.
No. It's interesting you mentioned that one specifically because there's a well-known case in Washington. It's called the hashtag case. It was not a client of mine, but. Ended up in appeal, and it was between the LCB, that's the Liquor Cannabis Board, that's the regulatory body charged with administrating over the cannabis rules in Washington. So they give the licenses, they enforce the rules, and a store that had put, I think it was some Christmas lights in the window.
Oh.
They spelled out the word pot, is my understanding. And yeah, LCB said, and I'm not sure exactly what they did in terms of enforcement, but it was enough that they fought back.
What about that? What about the supply chain coming to them? Say I don't know, where the hell did weed get grown or what? I mean,
So what do you mean exactly? So supply chain coming to the store?
No, let's say, I'm going out and I'm going to buy some weed. I'm going to buy a big old bag of it and I'm going to take it to my store or whatever I'm going to do or buy it.
So if you're a retail store and you want to have the product.
Yeah, and then you say, okay, what can I sell?
So you can sell what you can purchase from a processor who is also licensed. So retail stores in Washington are only supposed to sell products from other licensed processors in the state. And so anything that you carry in the store is supposed to be coming through that route.
But do you have to prove that in any way? Say, I'm using a licensed person, or I guess if you're under inspection, you could be.
So what we use in Washington is what's called a seed to sale system, which says that the product, cannabis, is tracked from the time it's a seed all the way through to the consumer sale.
Okay, that's what I've heard. That's the part I was trying to drive at.
Yeah.
And then, wow, so that's that. What if you were to go, now I'm not asking you your rates specifically, but if I was saying, hey, I want to get this thing going, and it's me, and I'm going to say, I want to get it rolling, what would you guess would be the time it would take me to get that set up? And then roughly the cost of legal fees. And we can just bunch it into one big old group.
That is, if I try to give you a number on that, would I think be impossible to do because it is so circumstance specific that it can vary widely, really widely.
Could it be $100,000?
If back in the early days when if you had applied for yourself for a license, you got awarded an application, so you had the license already. Say you had a location or somebody you knew the location. I've never been to a retail store that was actually set up with a folding table, but I mean, there's nothing saying that you couldn't maybe set up with a folding table, right?
Why
not? And so I know that there are examples of people who did it very inexpensively. I don't know how many of them succeeded.
Yeah.
I would say though that most of the clients that I worked with brought a lot more than that, generally speaking. But it ranges so wildly between clients, how the approach they take, what kind of design they want to do, if it's a grow, the type of grow facility that it is. You can do a grow in the ground, meaning just plants in the dirt.
Yeah.
You got to have security requirements that are met, probably for less than that, especially if you owned a farm already. At the other end of it, though, you've got very high-tech facilities very sophisticated. It's climate controlled, humidity controlled, AI, full light deprivation greenhouses. That's where they have curtains so they can control perfectly when the flowers and the plants are exposed to light. You got lights in the facility, supplemental lighting, and what kind of lights it is. And so it gets very sophisticated very, very quickly. So sky's the limit in terms of that. You could easily drop $10 million on a facility. So
Wow.
And that's why it's so hard to say, because it ranges so wildly.
Yeah. I guess that's true of any business. There was a good movie have you ever seen The Gentleman with Matthew McConaughey?
No,
Hugh Grant. It's just, in the end, Matthew's this kind of hip dude, big money, London guy.
Okay.
And without giving it away, he ends up being a cannabis guy, but he has this wildly creative distribution system.
Okay.
And makes a fortune. And it's just a quirky, fun story, all sorts of weird characters in it. And if you get it, I've watched it 2 or 3 times just because it's so creative. But it's if you're in the business, you might get a kick out of it,
Well, it's funny you say that, because there are examples over the years where people say, "Oh, have you seen this? You got to watch this. What you're doing and what you're describing is just straight up like this." Including some associates who they get a year in, they're like, "Well, I don't think I knew what I was getting into. This is like, you got to go watch the show," or something like that. But, this is one of the reasons that I'm stepping back right now. As family issues have come up, complications related to the surgery for my wife, I feel out of touch with so much of that. So much of my focus has been on the practice, especially starting a law firm straight out of law school.
That's no easy task.
Eat, drink, sleep, everything is building it. Now, I feel extremely fortunate that right now I'm in a position where I can step back.
Sure.
And when I left Fox, the plan was minimum 3 to 6 months that I want to take off. I'm going to need to spend with my family, just getting caught up. I feel like I missed so much. My kids, the older one especially. And so, even in the last month, it's just been phenomenal. I feel like being able to reconnect with my family. And I feel so fortunate that, as much of a sacrifice as it was for a period of time, 10 years, that I have that ability now.
Yeah.
For me,
I guess mine was a little more extended for my career. Thankfully, I did coach a lot of my kids. When I came home on a weekend, it's not like people would say, you're such a great father. No, I would alter my travel. Of course, any parent has some element of guilt on that, but I wanted to be with them. I have 5 girls, so there's no shortage of activity.
We're fortunate too, because even pre-COVID, because I know COVID's changed a lot of things, but pre-COVID, there were long stretches where I still read them a story at night or video. So they'd,
I loved reading stories
at
night. Oh, that's such a beautiful thing.
They hop on to hang out, Google Hangouts or something. Now dating doesn't exist anymore. Read a story together before they go to bed, and then, So
let me try your best.
Try to keep up and connect as best you can.
But it's the teen years are you'll experience it. The push away, is one of my daughters was talking to me about today, and I was saying, from that, like, the little girl all of a sudden isn't going to hold your hand walking through the mall, and then shortly thereafter, she doesn't even want to have you seen at school. And everybody say to me, "Oh, they'll be back," and I didn't believe it. I truly did not. I thought, no, this is, I've been cast into this gray, painful thing, but they all have. So if you cross through that, you may not believe it, but it is true. They do want to be with you. They do want to love you. They know that you're loving them. And, I won't say that you don't know that, but it hit me right in the face. They'll lie. They'll do stupid things. And they're very disappointing. And I'm not trying to say, oh, it's going to be horrible, but it can be just very much like, maybe you think back on yourself and you're like, oh God. You're doing that. I've had a lot of people tell me that, and this is it's an example where sometimes it's 2-way. You don't just give the advice to the clients. Sometimes you get really important life advice from your clients too. And it was something I was taught from growing up around business. Was when it comes to clients, you be friendly with your clients, but your clients are not your friends. And
I have not subscribed to that.
Yeah, no,
I've shared that with plenty of associates, but
yeah.
Now some of my closest friends are in fact clients. But,
Oh no,
I'd
say one of my best friends in Seattle. It was my lawyer, my corporate lawyer, years ago, and we have not transacted any of he left the legal business actually, but we've just become fantastic friends because you're so close to a guy.
Yeah, and I have so much respect for most of the people that I have known or gotten to know in this industry. And in fact, one of the things I really like about being in this space is I feel like you've got such a diverse crowd of people coming from so many different backgrounds. Because it's such a nascent industry, it's just getting started. There's so much opportunity for people to get in from whatever their background was, whether it was growing, whether a legacy grower, so black market grower, or they're a PhD chemist.
Just somebody's into it.
Yeah, and so there's just a very wide range and diverse group of people in this space.
Very cool. Now we're getting close to the end here. I don't want to suck down a whole lot of your time, but we'll just keep shooting the shit. And then when you say to me, "Hey, Mark, remember I told you I didn't really like you at the beginning?" I remember
now that we've had a chance to talk more and more, I actually,
come to like me.
Yeah.
Slowly, I've worn you down. It's why I sell.
Yeah.
I figure he'll eventually say, "Good God, if I give you an order, will you just shut up and leave?"
Hey, I'm sure plenty of people have thought that about me. So I'm not
hang
gonna
in
fault.
there.
Yeah,
hang in there.
Yeah.
But no, you did work with. Oh, have you ever heard of a company called the Dab Roast?
Does not sound familiar.
Okay, I'll just tell you about him real quick. He was in here,
Mm-hmm.
and I never knew what the hell a dab was, but I presume you do now.
Mm-hmm.
But anyway, he has this business, the Dab Roast, and his name's Scott McKinley. And of course, given the business and all, I just figured this guy's going to come into me just baked, and just like smart as shit.
Mm-hmm.
Had his head together.
Mm-hmm.
And he does this kind of funny thing.
I'd say more people than not. That's absolutely small.
I was
or
so
large.
impressed, like just spot on, knew what he wanted to do, had a focus, narrow after it.
Yep.
And he has a show called Cantana. It's a festival out in Snohomish this summer in August, which he's putting on. Anybody who may want to go to it, it's out in Snohomish. Called, I think it's Cantana.
Okay.
Let me apologize if I got that wrong, Scott.
How long has that been going?
I think he's only on his third year.
Okay.
But he's trying to drum up.
That's a long time.
Yeah,
Cannabis
he's
industry.
trying to drum up. Trying to make a buck out of it. And he's got booths and everything out this time and music but they do a few things that are funny where they do something on YouTube where they do. Like they do a dab and then not him. He has other people do it as actors, not actors. I mean, individuals that are not him. I think he might be doing one of them. But so they do a dab and then they ask each other questions. So slowly the conversation starts to deteriorate because the dabs are intensely strong.
Okay.
I don't do it, but a couple of my daughters said to me, "Dad, I don't think I get past one." It's just overpowering,
Okay.
And so watching it, I was like, wow, these guys are cranking. But that may not be your world. I'm not going to say we promote that.
Yeah, well, it's funny you say that because it's actually a story from Hillary Bricken.
Okay.
About that I do remember hearing once when she did she's doing a training or something for WSBA. That's the lawyer governing body in Washington. About coming back to the conference room after walking out or something, and they're hotboxing in the conference room.
Okay, and, what the hell is hotboxing? I'm an old guy.
So I guess they were I don't know what smoking or dabbing or what they were doing exactly, but apparently smoke-filled room when they walked in.
Okay.
But that was her story.
Mm-hmm. You get high from walking in.
I actually. I've been really impressed with the quality of people, regardless where they're coming from, whether they're a consumer or, not a consumer. There are very limited instances where I've ever had a client even ask, "Are you a consumer or have you tried our products?" People, and they come in, they want to meet with a lawyer. They're there to meet with a lawyer and they want to talk about the law.
Yeah. They don't want to pay you to chit chat about your weed.
Well,
maybe you don't charge for the weed chat.
But I mean, so yeah, I wouldn't say that a lot of my time as an attorney has been discussing or
I was looking at, I don't know, I presume they're still in business. Cresco Labs, I think that was the name of it. Are they still around?
Yeah, absolutely. My understanding was, in fact, when I was at Fox, after working on the True Leaf Harvest merger, one of the partners out of our Chicago office, that's their client they've worked with for many years. And so she and I handled all the West Coast regulatory due diligence on the Columbia Care Cresco. It's done by a lot of lawyers and a lot of firms may touch it, but yeah, we spent time on that. So
yeah, because I was reading it. Of course, their packaging is something that we do. So that just because
I'm not familiar with their packaging, actually.
Well, they have a stand-up pouch with a zipper that I looked at. It's very low quality versus what our company would do. Look like shit. Okay. But anyway, I'm just kidding. It's a perfectly beautiful bag. But, they had it in all forms and the like. But it's pretty good. It indicated
They're
that you
one
had
of the largest companies.
Yeah. You had some experience with them, didn't you?
Just what I described.
Yeah, okay. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Now, if you're publicly traded, that's one that started catching me off guard because of the federal things. Because I think, wait a minute.
Yeah.
But apparently they came rushing at it, and enough people just went, I'm throwing money at that.
Yeah. So it is a problem. And so the distinction that's usually made is when you say plant touching. So are you a plant touching company or not a plant touching company? So a company plant touching, right? So one of a client that I worked with, for example, first cannabis focused financial services company, Safe Harbor, great company based out of Colorado, provides financial services to cannabis companies because there are a lot of complications related to financial services.
I can imagine.
Like banking and things like that. You can have a whole show.
Getting your money out of it and putting it in your pocket, I imagine.
Yeah. Well, it's straight up cash for a long time. That's tough. I mean, that's really, and it's dangerous.
Room for rumble.
So, but they are a publicly traded company. And so the first in the United States. And so they had listed before I started working with them, but they made it through the process. And that is quite the accomplishment. So,
and so they're able to battle through the federal shit. But there's some lingering potential liability. You could lose your money.
There's a lot of strict compliance rules and things in their case. I mean,
but they're not touch. They're
not plant touching.
Okay.
Yeah, not plant touching. And so, in my experience, most publicly traded companies are Canadian publicly traded companies. I know that I don't know. I think there are examples of over-the-counter trading here in the United States, but come and go. Some people do it and then they get caught and they stop. And it's, but I'm not really familiar with that aspect of it. Did not advise publicly traded companies.
The one guy I heard talking was Canadian. I didn't put that together. Yeah. I didn't put that together. There's also been, only reading it recently, and I know that abuse is whatever anywhere, but I guess there's been some of these kids who have been just banging on this weed for years in high school, and they're having, psychotic episodes, manic episodes, ones that are, setting off bipolar. And are you seeing a lot of that, or do you have any comment on that? I guess it's much like booze. You drink a shitload of it, it's going to do bad things.
Yeah. So I'm not a physician.
Nor am I.
However, I do know physicians who are focused in this space and have kept up on it. And, at least one comes to mind who I remember 10 years ago was very outspoken critic, was saying nothing but problems. And today, opposite end of the spectrum. So it's completely changed the other side and said, in his case, he's nearing retirement. So he's been around a long time practicing medicine. He's like, I've been prescribing antidepressants long time. Best you ever hope for might be 2 weeks. Somebody come back and go, I don't know. I think maybe it's helping or something. He's like, I've seen cannabis now transform the life of a lot of people for the better. And he's
just getting high like at night or something like that.
I couldn't say exactly what they're doing. But I know that it is a very positive
Impact.
resource for a lot of people.
Well,
And
good.
so,
Well, good.
yeah.
You know, I think that I guess one of the things that's always, they say like with Prozac Nation back years ago, that they were pumping Prozac to people who they thought were either schizophrenic or anything. They didn't know how to really diagnose at the time. I'm actually reading a book on that, and that they just were pumping them. Well, now all of a sudden you started to have back then these issues where, oh, somebody went, batshit and killed themselves on Prozac. Well, now all of a sudden it sheds a new light on it in my mind that one of my brothers, who's a neurologist, said, well, you're dealing with a population that by its nature is at risk to harm themselves. So the statistics are a little, skewed in that regard.
Okay.
But now when I read this book, I'm like, oh my gosh. So in the 90s, they're just pumping this stuff, not knowing. Like here we'll try, something that's just
So Prozac was inducing this.
No, Prozac was being used as a cure or a what do you call it? Something to make people better over it.
Okay.
And a couple of the people in the story are just like, they just kept feeding it to me and it just wasn't doing shit. And, so then we're in and out of psych wards and, these terrible situations. But anyway, that's just, I don't know how we diverted on that. But, okay, so let's touch base on this. We know the basic thing. Child drama caused your tardiness, which we were... Wait. My daughter said to me that you were late because of something with your children.
Today?
Yeah.
No.
Oh, my God.
No.
Bridget, you made up an excuse to save his name.
I was only like 3 minutes later.
I know.
Yeah.
I came here and she wrote me this note. She said, oh, he may be running a few minutes behind. Or maybe it was Brian. Brian, why are you late? It's annoying, isn't it, John? Brian's the big boss.
Okay. You just bother me that much.
I don't really care either. What the hell?
Whatever.
What the hell? Never use Blash Studios again. I will say, though, as a commercial, Blash Studios here in Bellevue, Washington, Brian Lash, great guy, hard worker.
Yeah, absolutely.
Beautiful location. And I really do. I recommend him. If every vendor helped me, even in my business, as much as Brian has, there'd be much better business world out there. Much better business world. So anyway,
that's what I think anybody advising a business hopes. So
we all are. Do you think it's true with you, or do you think people would say never work with Josh again?
I don't know. For a long time early on, I could say I'm like I've never lost a client, or at least not to my knowledge. Yeah. I had senior surgeons be like, "Oh, just wait." But
you would say yes. Your answer's supposed to be, no, I have not had that. Wait.
No.
People have always recommended me.
The first one that really stands out in my mind, it was rough too, because I had a lot of respect for the client. They were cool, really like them. I mean, but they wanted to do something that was not okay. It's not allowed. And they
You're the legal guy.
The answer that I gave them, which is, no, I can't advise you to do that. I advise against doing that.
Did they pay the bill?
Not all of it.
Well, that's no shortage of that going on.
No.
They always say anybody's small business, don't forget how much money you got to spend chasing money.
Yeah.
And it's so true. Good Lord, people are jerks when it comes to money. But anyway, let's conclude with this question. I think we talked a little bit about, how you did this, but in your soul, or that may be a little heavy, but why? Why does a guy like you end up so choosing this path, or was there a drive?
Well, if you had told me in law school that I was going to be a cannabis or a marijuana lawyer, because cannabis is a word that really the industry, I feel like, embraced generally speaking. I mean, anybody
I know uses
later,
cannabis.
It was marijuana. And this was actually a conversation though early on, was what word do we use on it?
It's interesting. No, cannabis is not. I would say more it's
marijuana was in the law, all the regs and stuff, regulations all used the word marijuana until. So if you had told me in law school that you're going to be a marijuana attorney, I would have laughed.
Yeah.
It wasn't an area of law that I went after. In a lot of ways, I feel like it found me.
Okay.
And the timing was such that it lined up beautifully. I'm really grateful for that opportunity though. And I didn't know how my family would react. Like once it was clear, like I'm a year or so in, right? And I'm practicing law and I talk about it, but the cannabis thing, I just wasn't talking about that part with, say, more extended family. I just didn't know how people were going to react. And I remember with my grandfather, he was an entrepreneur and successful. And I turned to him, especially starting the law firm, for business advice. And I asked him, I said, what do you think about this? And he's since passed away, but a lot of respect for him, his position, all of this. Conservative. Vernal, Utah is as conservative as it gets.
Yeah.
And he was like, whatever your position on it at the end of the day, if you want to influence anything for good, being in proximity to it is the best way to do that. And so whatever your position is on it, he's like, if there's an opportunity, embrace it. Do the best with whatever you can with what comes to you.
That's some wisdom from a guy that I'm sure at a personal level didn't agree with the overall, needless to say.
Yeah, well, I thought that was very insightful.
It wasn't. I'm sure it gave you the comfort that you could do it. Mm-hmm. And did you ever think of leaving it?
Well, I technically have. Right now, technically speaking, excuse me, technically have. So, yeah. I don't know before, but it changes over time. There are times when it's more fun than others, but overall, it's been a very positive experience. I generally hope most of the people I work with feel the same way.
Yeah. Well, listen, Josh Ashby, I just wanted to say thanks a lot for coming in.
I really appreciate the invitation.
I'm sure you got a busy slate, and again, our show is about just chatting around with different people about what floats their boat.
Yeah.
How they got from point A to point B. Hopefully, there's someone out there, younger professional, maybe a little further along the line, who feels down in the dumps, don't know what the hell to do. Yep. I think a lot of younger people, they're called whatever the hell they are, Gen Y, Gen B, I don't even know what the hell it is anymore, that they're coming, they don't live this life or that life right, and blah, 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 blah. My perspective is, if you start judging younger generations about their lifestyle, you're old. That's the way it goes. No, and I think they're overwhelmed right now. I do believe. And I raised them. My generation raised them. So it's a little hard to be critical without being critical of yourself. Yeah. I think they've watched a world go by, added with social media, that they're overwhelmed. Just overwhelmed. And my show, the hope on this show is to reach out to them and hear them from people like you. And it gives them some insight, some hope.
I hope something I shared is useful.
Good. Well, not much, but you asked me. I forgot to ask one question. You didn't ask me, did I like you when I saw you? I don't know if I answered that question.
I don't care.
You don't care?
Sure. You can answer the question, yeah.
I just found you so appealing and handsome. I could tell you were smart right away, sincere. I say you handsome?
You can say I'm handsome.
Yeah, stylish?
Well, thank you.
Oh, yeah. Cool?
All right. Wow, you're laying it on thick here.
Okay, the only other thing is you're an asshole because you're a 49ers fan. As an Eagles fan, I'm sorry. Yeah. I'm sorry.
That's all right. I've learned to tolerate all.
Well, we're nice people. Go Eagles, Screw the Niners. Although you got a good team this year. It's bumming me out.
Comes and goes, ebbs and flows.
Oh, doesn't it?
Yeah.
If you can't handle losing, don't be involved in sports. Period.
You got it. And life is no different. Sportsmanship.
Yep, it is.
Just had this conversation with my son last night.
Did you really?
No,
10-year-old.
Absolutely, yeah.
Well, good. Yeah. He should know that. Shucks, it didn't work right. And let me tell you another thing. You argue with the ref or the coach, bad things happen.
There's a poem that means a lot to me. There's a line from it. It says, if you can learn to greet that loss and victory, so triumph and losing, greet those imposters the same, then you can be a man.
That's very cool.
Both are, at the end of the day, illusions. It's you that matters, who you are and the decisions you make in response. So,
Well, that's very cool saying. That's very cool. And hey, thanks a lot for coming on. And you've been a lot of fun to talk to.
Yeah, I know we had to reschedule. I appreciate you, the flexibility.
Oh,
Thank
don't
you.
worry about it. You know, we're moving around a lot here.
Oh.
Generally been lucky. You know, we've been keeping up to gosh, this must be probably, I might be wrong, probably our 80th episode. And we have another.
That's quite a few.
Yeah,
That's getting up there.
Yeah.
How often are you? How are you?
We interview every week.
Okay.
And then we release every 2 weeks. Mostly that's because the biggest pain in the ass is editing. By far. Because we're not running live. So we bring it in and we may condense this down, you know, 20 minutes or so. We may not. Sometimes we run them full just because there's enough beef in it. And
oh, no, I get it. I mean, the book that we wrote, I mean, had twice as many words in the beginning. You pare that down and you pare it down and you pare it down.
And if when you conclude this, if there's anything that you feel like, gee, I'd rather not have that said, or if you'd like to listen to the raw, you know, we can kick it to you. And unless I don't think there's much you said, you know. But anyway, if you ponder it, I had a friend of mine who came in here, was a got undrafted free agent into the New England Patriots, then moved around the league for about 8 or 9 years, generally, you know, special teams, then ended up getting a chance to play on the Falcons in the Super Bowl. Then he became a pastor. Then he went back and sold pharmaceuticals.
Okay.
But anyway, at the conclusion of his conversation with me, he called up and said, hey, there's a piece of that I feel is inappropriate that I should have lifted, if you don't mind. And of course we did. You know, that's not an issue. Obviously, selling pharmaceuticals, you could get yourself in a shitload of trouble.
I can imagine.
You know, not selling some, you know, hair, you know, what is it, a Life Spring, Forever, Youth Forever.
Not familiar with that one.
There isn't one. It makes you young forever.
Okay.
You got it? You got it?
Right. Yeah. See, I heard end, and so I'm like, checking out already. There we go.
All right. Listen. Thanks again.
Yep.
Have a good day.
All right.